Good morning, everybody. This is part 2 of Pastel Lessons for Beginners. And today I'm going to do a demonstration, but first what I want to do is show you different ways to handle the actual piece of pastel on the point and on the side. Okay, the first thing you need to know is when you get your pastels, these NuPastels, they have a piece of paper on them. And the company, I don't know why, but they really glue this paper on. Well, here's what I wanted to show you about the NuPastel. Can you see that number 244? All the NuPastels have numbers on them, so when you want to reorder, it's great to keep that little piece with the number on it so you'll know what color you want to reorder. Your sets will not have that paper on them. They're just when you reorder, which I reorder from Dick Blick, and I also get some replacement from Preston Art Center up in Louisville at the Gardner Lane Shopping Center. Now, as I was taking the paper off of this, it broke. Okay, that's okay, because when we're working with pastel, we don't want a great big long piece, because if you use the side, which is what we'll talk about, it covers too much paper at one time. So what you want to do is you want to take your pastel and break it into smaller, more usable size piece. Now, that's still got some of that nasty paper on it. The pastel, you're thinking, oh, it's a drawing medium, so I'm going to draw like I would draw with a crayon with the tip, which is fine. That's a perfectly legitimate way to use pastel. But you also want to use it like a paintbrush. So you want to put it on the side and make broad strokes. Like you would if this was a paintbrush. Broad strokes. Now you can put it on the edge, that little sharp edge, and make some nice long, put it up here on the tip and draw with it on the tip. But mostly I use the side. So here's what I wanted to show you about the new. These are color swatches of the colors that I chose from the NuPastel set ahead of time, so you can see where we're going with our colors. I always like to make a thumbnail sketch before I get started to explore different compositional ideas. Thumbnails are very small. Here you can see where I started the sketch on the Canson paper with a pastel pencil, and the reference photo is right next to it. Here's the pastels that I chose to use, and eventually I added a gray to this grouping. Some of the pastels do have a cautionary label. If they do, you just need to be careful with them. Don't eat and drink around them. Be respectful of the media. Okay, so here's our demonstration piece for this morning. I'm working on the Canson paper. It's a gray, and I'm working on the smooth side, which means, as I said in the last video, you can probably only put 2 layers of color on top of each other, maybe 3. But because I told you this was a good paper for you to start with, for one thing, you can buy it at Michael's. The sanded paper you have to order from Dick Blick or another order company. I think the second thing you'll notice is the reference photo, which is from Yosemite National Park. I love these little trees. It's a vertical, and the drawing is a horizontal. I did that because with YouTube, horizontal format works better. So since I changed things, I did a little sketch, little thumbnail sketch. It's always a good idea to do a thumbnail sketch. Pay attention to the details that you might kind of generalize if you don't do a sketch. Helps you figure out composition. So I showed you in the reference photo the pastels that I'm using. I like to pick them out ahead of time, and these are all NuPastels. Fairly hard. This is one of the very dark ones. So I always tell my students, they want to know exactly which pastel I'm using. It doesn't matter so much what color you're using, but what value. How dark it needs to be, how light it needs to be. The problem with that set of 46 is it doesn't have a really good dark Prussian blue. Now you can use black, if you that's better than not getting dark enough. But I do like these Prussian blue, indigo blue. I like it has a little more interest to that dark. So I'm gonna see how I'm working on the side. Now this is the spruce blue, has a little bit of a green to it. No, it's a Prussian blue. I'm going to work on the side, block in all this dark area first. Now one thing you'll probably notice is when I drew it out, might as well have a little drawing lesson here. I try to keep things, I mark the center of the paper, and I try to keep things out of the very center, the design out of the center of the paper. These are the 1/3 marks, which you've probably heard of the golden mean, which is pretty much dividing your paper into thirds. Most optimal place for your point of interest would be where these thirds intersect. It's always a good idea to pick out the majority of the colors you think you're going to use. For one thing, when you do that, it kind of helps you see if you like these colors together. And then also it keeps you from doing what I call the crayon box approach, which is where you keep reaching back into your pastels and picking out more color. And when you do that, you end up with every color, every color you've got, which doesn't necessarily make a good composition. Now this is a purple I'm adding over top of that blue. The color theory that I'm working on, this is purple, basically purple, orange, and green. Now, generally when I get started, I like to block in the dark blues, the darker areas first, and then the lighter areas I often block in with an orange to show where the sun is going to be shining. The sun's going to be coming from this side because the shadow is that way. So this is going to be the sunniest part of my trees. And this will be the more shady part of my trees. Let's put a little bit of blue on that. Now, with pastels, because of the way you're holding it in your hand, the tendency is to want to make all your strokes this way. It's the easy way to do it. But that gets pretty boring, so I like for you to break your strokes up into other directions, which means you're going to have to twist your shoulder. Twist your hand, twist your shoulder. Let's put a little bit of shadow on this mountain back here. The shadow on that mountain will help pop our trees out from the background. And up here in the sky, it's a pretty light sky, blue. I didn't pick any blue out of my set because I think this kind of pinkish color works better with the other colors that I've picked out. So that's pretty much the basic underpainting, what I would call the very beginning of it. And now I'll go back in with a lighter yellow, come back in here, put on the sunshiny part of these trees. Now with NuPastel, because we're working on this Canson paper, when you rub it over top of the color underneath, it's going to pick it up. So this yellow green, this yellow, warm yellow, and this darker green, when you rub it over, you're going to pick up some of that green. You're going to have a third color. Now here on this piece, I see a lot of sunshine coming across here. Let's go ahead and get the lightest light of the sky in. This is a cream, looks like 276 cream. Now beginners have a tendency to want to rub things in with their fingers. You can do that with Canson paper. It's not going to hurt your finger like it would hurt with sanded paper. But if you start rubbing it, you eliminate these fun little specks of color that show through and make it much more interesting. And this is a very light, almost white, 211. We'll make it lighter down here at the base of the sky. Now by working on that, then we'll have a contrast with the mountain, so we can know a little bit how much darker we're going to go with the mountain. Okay, I'm back from my break, and I'm going to try to finish this up pretty quickly because I want to do another one on the sanded paper so you can see the difference between the sanded paper. And I added some gray to the set. Gray, it's a nice neutral, and sometimes it really helps things to pop out from the background. So first I'm going to put some of this, I forget which blue this is. I think it's the Prussian blue. I'm going to put this, working on this area. You can take that dark and kind of cut into the orange yellow to give these trees a little bit more shape, a little more interesting than just a big old ball. Here, I'm trying to pay attention to the value. This is a little bit lighter than that. Now, I'm going to take the gray, go back over that blue. A nice blue-gray. And this kind of neutral blue-gray up against that yellow-orange. That's a nice color. And you know, it's not necessarily that color, but every color that you put onto your paper affects all the other colors that you happen to have on it. So it's not necessarily what's in the photograph, but does this work with this? That's why I said it's not necessarily what color I'm using, but the value of it, how light and how dark it is. Now this gray, I'll put just gray on this part. This is going to be a little sunnier. Although it's going to be sunnier, I don't want it to be as bright as that. Let's see what this kind of pinkish color looks like. Oh, that's kind of nice. I'll come back to that. Here we have some sunshine on these trees back here. So I'll put some green in there. We don't want these trees back here to be nearly as bright as that, but we do want them to be a little bit more interesting. You can already tell the tooth of this paper is really filling up. Put a little bit of orange, kind of warm that up a little bit. That way this area works well with this area. Put a little orange on this part of the tree. Now this has gotten a little bit flat. Oh, here also we have some nice little shadows coming across there, which makes this flat area of the field be a little bit more interesting. Well, first I'll try with this kind of dark green. We don't want the shadow to be as dark as the shadow up here. Now I'm going to stop for just a second and step back and look at it. Okay, you know, I said that this was my least favorite paper. Well, I can tell that the tooth of the paper is starting to fill up. And I don't normally rub color in, but I kind of consider this still the underpainting. And I don't want the color to be weakened by that gray showing through. So I'm going to take a Viva paper towel. Viva is a really nice paper towel for rubbing things in. A lot of oil painters use Viva paper towels too. It's very soft, cloth-like. So I'm going to rub that blue in. Besides, things in the background should be softer anyway. That's what makes them go towards the back. Sharper edges in front, softer edges in the back. Okay. Now, I do like this purple. I'll come back in, put a little more purple down in there. Kind of losing the shape of my tree here. These colors are ooching in together, so I'm going to use a little bit of orange. Because the thing that's neat about this photograph is those trees are really in bright sunshine. And this is really in dark shadow. So that contrast makes it interesting. So I have purple on here, so I'm going to use one of these blues. The edge here is a nice place to test out your color. That's more of a blue-green. I think that's the indigo blue. Yeah, that's a good strong color. Now you notice my strokes are very vertical right now. It's because these trees are growing up, so I like my strokes to reflect the direction of the vegetation. Generally, your trees are the darkest part of a painting because they catch the least amount of light. The sky would be the lightest. The ground would be the second to the lightest. Mountains that are at an angle are next to the darkest. That's Carlson's theory of planes. Which is a good book to read if you can find it. Carlson's landscape paintings, landscape book. Okay, now the trees have some nice dark in between the trunks. I think I'll take a little of this cream, go ahead and get some of those trunks in there so I know where to put my darks. Now when you're doing trunks of trees, don't line them up like telephone poles. If you've ever taken a workshop from me, you've heard that before. Man, this paper does not want to have me do anything else to it. I'm going to take it out and spray it. You know, when you're talking about composition, you want to vary your shapes. You don't want everything to be the same. That's boring. So this, the dark in this group of trees, I'll let that be a little bit higher. Now I am going to stop for a minute. I'm going to take this out front because the spray that I use, it does have a cautionary label somewhere on it. Anyway, that's a spray. Don't use this inside. It's nasty stuff. So take it outside. Don't use this inside. Take it outside. Okay, I took it out and gave it a spray. If you spray really heavy, you definitely are going to darken it, even with that high-end spray that I got. But in this case, it's called workable fixative, and in this case, you want to be able to work back over top of what's there. Workable fixative, you can put new color on, and it sticks much better. Okay. I'm going to use this, this is the lightest yellow in the set that I pulled out. I'm going to use the I don't think I want that white. Let's use this cream for these trunks. Now here I'm pushing pretty hard, trying to get the NuPastel to stick to this paper. See, it's picking up that blue. purple on this shadow, darken it up without getting too awful dark. Maybe a little, so I see a little bit of green in there. Oh, that's nice, I like that. Repetition, variation. Use a little bit of green down here, throw a little bit up in there. Maybe a little bit up here on the trees. Put some of that cream up there instead of that real white. White. I don't want the sky to be so terribly important. A little bit more pink over top of it. Okay. This is nice and bright down here. We had a little bit more of this really nice bright yellow. Late fall, we'll have a few little leaves blowing off. Now, this mountain's pretty flat. I see there's actually some striations of the rock. I don't know if I want to get into that much detail. Sometimes with pastel, you can put it on. You don't like it, definitely put another layer back over top of it and change it. That's one of the lovely things about pastel, is it's very changeable, as opposed to watercolor where you kind of get stuck. What you put there is what you put down is what you get. I think that's as much as I'm going to do right now. I might go back in and do a little bit more off camera where I have more time to look at it. But I want to do another one for you on the sanded paper so you'll see how lovely color can be on sanded paper. I think this should get narrowed down here. Okay, a little bit of that orange back in there. I can see some warmth in those trees. Okay. People say, how do you know when you're done? I always say if I feel like I'm making it worse instead of better, it was definitely time to stop, and probably should have stopped 5 minutes before. There. Okay, good enough. Hey, thanks for watching Pastel Lessons for the Beginners Part 2. And I will be doing Part 3 on sanded paper, so stay tuned.